The lone human vessel breached the atmosphere like a meteorite, trailing fire and debris as it plummeted toward the surface of Vexara Prime. From the observation deck of the Galactic Conclave's headquarters, Grand Archon Clivax watched with clinical detachment. Just one small ship against the might of the 17 most advanced civilizations in the known universe. A desperate final act from a species that had already lost. "Analysis," Clivax demanded, his 6 pupils contracting as he focused on the projected trajectory. Commander Oshri, her crystalline exoskeleton glinting under the artificial lights, consulted her neural interface. "Primitive design, Archon. Pre-warp light technology. Appears to be one of their last stand vessels. Minimal crew complement, likely automated." "Curious," Clivax mused. 3 stellar cycles conquering their colonies, a mere rotation to subjugate their homeworld. And now they send this? The humans had fought with unexpected ferocity when the Conclave arrived to claim Earth's resources. The Conclave, in its 10,000 cycles of expansion, had never encountered such resistance from a pre-ascension species. Most races submitted when shown the futility of resistance. Humans had not. "Intercept and destroy," Clivax ordered dismissively. Oshri hesitated. "Our defense grid detects unusual energy readings, nothing matching known human weapons signatures." "Of course not." Clivax clicked his mandibles in amusement. "They've exhausted their conventional arsenal. This is desperation." On the main viewing screen, the vessel's descent slowed as emergency thrusters fired. It wasn't crashing, it was landing, precisely and deliberately, in the central plaza of the Conclave outpost. "Fascinating," whispered Oshri. "They're broadcasting something, audio only." "Let's hear their final words," Clivax gestured magnanimously. The message was brief, transmitted in the universal trading language. "We are the USS Prometheus. We come bearing fire." The ship's outer hull began to shimmer with an iridescent glow that no sensor could properly analyze. Lieutenant Merivale, monitoring security protocols, suddenly straightened. "Archon, we have a problem. Our automated defense systems, they're not responding." "Impossible," Clivax snapped. "Deploy the garrison." Before the order could be relayed, the human vessel emitted a pulse of energy unlike anything their instruments had ever recorded. It wasn't an explosion, it was something far worse. Clivax felt it first, a tingling sensation beneath his carapace, followed by searing pain as the microscopic nanites designed to interface with the Conclave's technology began to burn through his neural pathways. Across the observation deck, officers collapsed as their augmentations turned against them. "What is happening?" Clivax gasped, watching in horror as his exoskeletal command interface began to melt into his flesh. Oshri, less augmented than most, managed to remain standing long enough to check the planetary security feed. Her voice trembled. "The same is happening everywhere. It's spreading through our network." On the screen, the human vessel sat untouched while around it, the most advanced technological civilization in the galaxy began to burn, not with conventional fire, but something far more insidious. The lesson humanity had learned too late to save their own world, but just in time to exact revenge, became clear. In a universe where every species had embraced biomechanical integration, the most primitive might also be the most immune. Doric Newell, chief scientist of the Conclave's technological division, had been on the far side of Vexara Prime when the human ship landed. He watched through secure feeds as the unprecedented catastrophe unfolded, his forearms working frantically across multiple interfaces. "Isolate all systems," he ordered his research team. "Sever connections to the central network." But it was already too late. The human weapon, for that's what the ship itself clearly was, had released something that defied conventional understanding. It wasn't a virus in the traditional sense. It was something that operated at the quantum level, targeting the intersection between biological and synthetic components. Across the planet, the highly augmented conclave species were collapsing as their enhancements malfunctioned catastrophically. Neural implants overheated, communication arrays embedded in sensory organs emitted destructive frequencies, and mechanical limbs seized and contorted. "It's brilliant," Doric whispered despite himself, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his horror. "They've weaponized the very foundation of our superiority." His assistant, Ziva Lan, her bioluminescent skin flickering with distress, pulled up surveillance footage from across the conclave territories. "The effect is spreading through our interstellar communication relays. Reports of similar outbreaks on 7 other worlds and counting." The elegance of the human counterattack was its devastating simplicity. The conclave had spent millennia evolving alongside their technology, each new generation more integrated with synthetic enhancements than the last. Their weapons, their ships, their very bodies, all connected through the same fundamental quantum architecture. And the humans had found the key to burn it all down. "We need to warn the Ascendancy," Doric said, referring to the highest council of conclave leadership. "We need to—" He stopped mid-sentence, eyes widening as his personal implants began to glow beneath his skin. Ziva backed away. "Your augments? Quarantine." "Me!" Doric gasped. "The infection is in my systems. It must have transferred when I accessed the security feeds." Despite his brilliance, despite the hastily erected firewalls and protective measures, the human contagion had found him. As pain began to radiate through his body, Doric realized the true scope of what humanity had accomplished. "They studied us," he managed through clenched teeth. "While we conquered them, they were learning our weaknesses." On the monitor, the human ship remained inert, its work already done. The weapon had been released and would continue spreading until nothing remained of the conclave's technological supremacy. In those final, agonizing moments before his cognitive implants failed, Doric appreciated the poetic justice. The conclave had dismissed humans as primitive because they had resisted total technological integration. That very primitiveness had been their salvation, and now the conclave's downfall. As his consciousness faded, Doric saw reports flooding. In from across the galaxy, the quantum contagion was spreading faster than light itself, carried by the conclave's own communication network. What had begun with just one human ship would end with the collapse of an empire. Aboard the USS Prometheus, Lieutenant Commander Vex Orlov watched the chaos unfold with grim satisfaction. The small command crew, just 5 humans, all chosen, for their complete lack of technological augmentation, monitored the progress of Operation Prometheus with solemn silence. "Quantum Cascade has reached critical mass," reported Navigator Indra Kale, her fingers dancing across the ship's deliberately archaic control systems. "The Conclave's entire network is compromised. No evidence of successful containment." Vex nodded, rubbing the scarred tissue where his military-grade neural implants had once been surgically removed. That operation, performed without anesthesia, in the ruins of New Sydney, had been excruciating, but necessary. Every member of this mission had undergone the same painful purging. "Status report on the QCP?" Vex inquired, referring to the quantum cascade propagator, the ingenious weapon that humanity had developed in its final days of freedom. Chief Engineer Malachi Ravid examined the readouts from his station. "The propagator is performing beyond expectations. The Conclave's attempts to firewall have failed completely. Their tech-biological integration is working against them exactly, as we predicted." Research specialist Lumen Ray, the quiet genius who had conceptualized the QCP, spoke for the first time since launch. "It wasn't difficult," she said softly. "Their greatest strength was always their greatest vulnerability. they became so dependent on their augmentations that they forgot what it means to be purely biological. The fifth crew member, Security, Officer Kenji Tamura, remained vigilant at his station. We should prepare for manual resistance. Some of their forces must have limited augmentation. Vex shook his head. Intelligence suggests the Conclave hasn't maintained non-augmented forces for over 3 centuries. Any survivors will be scattered, confused, and effectively disabled. Through the view screen, they watched as the once mighty Conclave installation around them descended into chaos. The gleaming structures that had represented the peak of technological achievement across 17 species were now tombs for those. Inside, as systems failed catastrophically. "We should feel something, shouldn't we?" Indra asked suddenly, her voice hollow. "Remorse? Horror? We're killing billions." "They harvested Earth," Kenji replied flatly. "Stripped our colonies, enslaved survivors for experimentation." Vex turned to face his crew. The weight of what they had accomplished, what they had become, hung heavy in the recycled air of their deliberately primitive spacecraft. "We're not just killing them," Lumen clarified. "We're ending their way of life. Those who survive will be thrown back technologically by thousands of years, as they did to us," Malachi added. Vex's gaze returned to the view screen. "The difference is, humanity knows how to survive without technology. We've spent our history fighting against our own extinction. The Conclave species have forgotten what it means to struggle." On the horizon, enormous arc-shaped buildings began to collapse as their structural integrity fields failed. The Conclave's technological paradise was crumbling, one system at a time. Admiral Lin's last order, Vex reminded them, was to ensure that what happened to Earth never happens to another world. This isn't just revenge, it's prevention. The crew fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts as they watched the technological apocalypse they had unleashed. Just one human ship had arrived, and as promised, everything burned. 3 days after the arrival of the Prometheus, Archon Ilris Vey of the Hyraxian contingent found herself in an unfamiliar state, helpless. Once the third highest-ranking member of the Conclave Council, she now struggled to light a fire using primitive methods in the forests outside the ruined capital. Her ceremonial robes hung in tatters, the embedded status indicators and climate, regulators now dead and in some cases toxic. Most of her personal augmentations had failed catastrophically, though she had been fortunate. Her limited combat implants had shut down rather than turned against her. "Archon," a voice called. Ilris turned to see Jarek Dev, once her chief security officer, now reduced to using a sharpened piece of metal as a walking stick. His powerful exoskeleton had fused at the joints, forcing him to tear free of most of it. "We've found others. Perhaps 24 survivors from the central complex." Ilris nodded grimly. "Any communication devices still functioning?" "None," Jarek confirmed. "The humans were thorough. Whatever they unleashed affected everything connected to our quantum infrastructure, which was everything." A rustling from the underbrush put them on alert. But it was only Tellus Moore, the xenobiologist who had been studying human physiology before the attack. Ironically, her work had kept her among the least augmented of the Conclave leadership. "I've been thinking," Tellus said without preamble, her naturally large eyes blinking rapidly in the fading light, "about why they did it this way." "Revenge," Jarek spat. "Simple barbarism." Tellus shook her head. "No, they could have deployed conventional weapons, destroyed this world, perhaps several, but this..." She gestured at the distant ruins where plumes of smoke still rose. "This was specifically designed to target our way of life while preserving the planets themselves." Ilris considered this. "You admire them." "I understand them," Tellus corrected. "What we saw as their weakness, their resistance to full technological integration, became their salvation, and our downfall." As night fell, more survivors trickled into their makeshift camp. Former leaders of an interstellar empire now struggled with the most basic survival tasks. Many were injured where implants had malfunctioned. All were traumatized by their sudden vulnerability. Reports from the Astronomical Observatory suggest the effect has spread throughout conclave space, Jarek informed Ilris in hushed tones. Billions dead or incapacitated, fleets disabled, communication networks destroyed. Ilris stared into the small, struggling fire. And the humans? The ship remains where it landed. No movement detected. In the darkness beyond their camp, unfamiliar sounds echoed through the forest, the native fauna of Vexara Prime, no longer kept at bay by perimeter fields and sonic deterrents. The conclave members huddled closer together, suddenly aware of how dependent they had become on their technology. "We studied them for weakness," Ilris said finally. "We should have studied them for strength. Humans survived on their homeworld for millennia without the advantages we take for granted. They know how to live in harmony with nature when necessary, and how to conquer it when required." Tellus nodded solemnly. "And now, so must we." As the night deepened, Ilris found herself doing something she had never done in her long life, questioning the Conclave's fundamental beliefs about technological progression. In just 3 days, humanity had accomplished what no species had managed in 10,000 years. They had brought the Conclave to its knees with nothing more than a single ship and an intimate understanding of their enemy's greatest weakness. 5. Weeks after the Prometheus landed, Commander Vex Orlov stood on a hilltop overlooking what had once been the magnificent capital of the Conclave. Nature was already reclaiming the ruins. Vines crept up disabled spires, and local wildlife scavenged among collapsed structures. "It's time," said Lumen Ray, joining him at the overlook. "The quantum cascade has run its course. Every system connected to the Conclave network has been neutralized." Vex nodded slowly. "And the survivors?" "Scattered groups, learning to survive without technology. Most of the highly augmented didn't make it." Her voice remained clinical, but her eyes betrayed complex emotions. "The less modified species are adapting faster. The Hyraxians, particularly. The mission had succeeded beyond their most optimistic projections." The quantum cascade propagator had spread through the Conclave's vast network, targeting the integration points between biological tissue and synthetic enhancements. An empire built on technological supremacy had fallen in less than 6 weeks. "Admiral Lin would be satisfied," Vex said, more to himself than to Lumen. From behind them came the sound of approaching footsteps. Kenji Tamura arrived with Indra Kalei and Malachi Ravid, completing their small circle atop the hill. "Ships prepped for departure," Malachi reported, "though I'm not sure where we're supposed to go. Earth is gone. Our colonies are stripped bare." "We have the coordinates Admiral Lin provided," Indra reminded them. "The sanctuary world." Vex turned to face his crew, the last official representatives of humanity's military. "Before we leave, we have one final task." Together they descended into the valley, where a small delegation waited nervously. Led by Archon Ilris Vey, the group consisted of representatives from each surviving conclave species, those who had been willing to meet with the humans responsible for their civilization's collapse. As the humans approached, Vex noted how quickly the survivors had adapted. Gone were the elaborate technological garments and augmentations. Instead, they wore practical clothing fashioned from available materials. Tools hung from makeshift belts. Simple, effective, entirely mechanical. "Archon Vey," Vex greeted formally. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Ilris inclined her head slightly. Her once luminous skin had dulled without the nutrient enhancement she had relied upon, but her eyes remained sharp and assessing. "Commander Orlov, you asked for this audience. We have come." "We're leaving," Vex stated simply. "Our mission is complete." A murmur ran through the assembled survivors. Tellus More stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding protocol. You're not establishing a colony? Taking control? Lumen shook her head. That was never our purpose. Then what?
Was?
Demanded Jarek Dev, his hand instinctively moving to the primitive weapon at his side. Vex reached into his pocket and removed a small metal cube, entirely mechanical with no electronic components. He held it out to Iris. This contains seeds from Earth, thousands of species, plants that produce food, medicine, building materials, along with instructions for cultivation. He paused. And historical records. Iris took the cube cautiously. Why would you give us this? Because extinction isn't our goal, Vex explained. The Conclave believed technological advancement was the only path forward. Humanity learned differently. Sometimes progress means stepping back and reconnecting with what made us strong in the first place. Kenji stepped forward, offering another object, a bound book with actual paper pages. Basic engineering principles, no electronics, no quantum technology, just fundamental physics and mechanics that won't trigger what remains of the cascade. We're giving you a chance, Indra added, to rebuild differently. The survivors exchanged glances, confusion evident on their faces. This mercy was unexpected, from a species they had nearly eradicated. You could have eliminated us completely, Iris observed. Why didn't you? Vex looked out over the changed landscape. Because that's what you would have done, and we're not you. As the humans turned to leave, Tellus called after them, Where will you go? Lumen was the one who answered, looking back over her shoulder with the first genuine smile any of them had seen since the mission began. To find other humans. We weren't the only ones who escaped. The 5 crew members of the Prometheus walked away, leaving behind the seeds of a different kind of civilization. Behind them, the survivors of the once mighty Conclave stood in silence, holding the inheritance of a species they had gravely underestimated. Just one human ship had arrived and everything had burned. But from those ashes, something new would grow, tempered by hard lessons and guided by the wisdom of a species that had learned, through countless struggles, how to begin again.